This time we have a presentation by Toho Water Authority.
Mayor, if I could just speak for just a second. If you
Yes, sir.
recall, 2 years ago, Mr. Wheeler and I made a presentation about potentially having Toho Water Authority take over management of our water utility, wastewater facility. And, you know, I spoke against it. And then I was directed by council to come back with this presentation by Mr. Swingle, and he's here today to do that. And again, we're going to listen to what he has to say. As a fiduciary of the city, I think it's my responsibility to make recommendations, and I think we should look at ways that we can take care of our citizens and take care of our employees and reduce costs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Swingle.
Thank you very much, City Manager and Council. I'm happy to be here today to speak with you. I want to first start off, and my name is Todd Swingle. I'm the Executive Director for Toho.
Thank you.
I want to start off just with a step back in time and a history of partnership, because regardless of any discussions that go on today, St. Cloud and Toho have experienced a long-standing partnership for the entirety of Toho's existence. That launched back in 2005 with an interlocal agreement that supported cooperative planning. We do have some system interconnects, and we do have some bulk supply agreements. We participate in certain regional water supply planning projects, most noteworthy the Cypress Lake project. And there are some degree of shared services. So Toho does host St. Cloud's customer service database. The discussion we have today is enhancing that partnership and the possibility of what that could include. The agenda we'll walk through is a little bit about Toho. Why is utility integration good for Toho? Why is this good for St. Cloud? And then potential next steps. So a little bit about Toho. We're a water, wastewater, and reclaimed water service provider that was formed by a special act of the legislature. That's all we do, water, wastewater, and reclaimed water. That is our focus. That's our priority. We were originally born out of the city of Kissimmee's utilities. The Toho Water was the city of Kissimmee utility. It also included then merging in private utilities that were under the oversight of the county at that time. We are overseen by a board of supervisors that are representatives of our 3-member governments. And our 3-member governments are Osceola County, the city of Kissimmee, and Polk County. Our board consists of 5 voting members, 2 from Osceola, 2 from Kissimmee, and 1 from Polk, and they self-elect a chair. Our board also includes 1 ex officio member from each member government, and that is one of the elected officials from that member government who sits on our board and is a full participant in our discussions, but is a non-voting member. A few facts about Toho. We have about 115,000 connections. We operate 13 water and 8 water reclamation facilities. We manage over 3,000 miles of infrastructure, and we have about a little over 380 authorized positions. Earlier this year, our board adopted a change in our vision statement. It's now listed as our overall principles and priorities. And it's that our customers, our community, and our employees trust that Toho cares. And with that, we prioritize providing safe and reliable services, protecting the environment, delivering value, and investing in the future. We think those are all very important things for both any member of the community, but also specifically for a utility. So taking a little bit of step back in time when Toho was formed and the member priorities that existed. First was to preserve water resource by promoting regional water supply planning, effective wastewater management, and proactive water, wastewater, and reclaimed water master planning, knowing that planning for these key infrastructure services was integral to planning out the growth of Osceola County and our other member organizations, including the city of Kissimmee. And actually, that was a time, St. Cloud was at the table at that time as well. Maintaining control. Toho is a member-controlled organization. As you noted, our board is comprised of our member governments. And we do have the voting and ex officio representation from each of those member governments. The other goal was to provide accountability and equity, which was to equalize the rates across the Toho service area, which at the time was not the case. And then also retain the payment in lieu of taxes to members, which retains many of the existing benefits of owning and operating a municipal utility, and that is what you may know of as your general fund transfer. So as I mentioned, we were born out of the city of Kissimmee's view, or out of the city of Kissimmee's utility. And Mike Steigerwald, the city manager, is here today, and I'd like to just ask him to come up briefly, and because he can provide the best representation of what Toho has meant to Kissimmee.
Good to have you all the way over here from Kissimmee.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Wanted to give the board an overview of just what, how the experience has been with the city of Kissimmee, and having been not the city manager at the time, but a department head, I was able to participate in some of the meetings and also share some of the concerns that doing a more or less a spin-off of our internal water and sewer department into a public authority and sharing it with Osceola County may realize. And so I think the biggest concern that we had back in the day was the impact on our revenues. The Water and Sewer Fund, which was part of the Water Resources Department of the city, transferred a set amount into the city's general fund and served as a revenue source. Going back to those days, the growth on an annual basis of that fund was pretty minor. Going back to 2000, the amount of funding that the general fund received from the Water and Sewer Department was $2.75 million. Just 5 years later, which is the first year after the merger, we were at just over $4 million, or I'm sorry, $3 million, 3 and change, like 3.1 and change. 5 years later, my first year as city manager in fiscal year 2010, we collected 4.35, and what we're projecting for 2022 is upwards of $8.1 million. So the revenue generation that concerns we had about turning the more or less our utilities over to another government per se really weren't materialized, and in fact I think we've gained at a higher rate under the partnership with Toho Water Authority than we did as an independent water and sewer utility. And a lot of that is a result of the addition of the private systems that have been acquired over the years. The Harmony system, the Poinciana system. The city of Kissimmee probably would have never acquired that if it had remained as a departmental water and sewer utility. The other benefit that we've received is, just the overall reduction in the load that the Water and Sewer Department carried in the day-to-day operations of the city as an organization. Debt service significantly dropped. The amount of debt ratio that we had after the utility was spun off significantly dropped to the point where we no longer had difficulties in acquiring debt for capital projects and things like that. Our budget is significantly shorter process. Our commission meetings used to be held weekly, and we now do them every other week. And so the general workload of the city and the focus that the city commission can place upon the core services of public safety, police, fire, and EMS, parks and recreation, planning, and economic development was allowed them really to focus on those things going forward. Things that we looked at that I think were important and are going to be important should consideration be given by the city of St. Cloud is that the employees need to be taken care of. That's one of the biggest concerns we had back in the day. And to this day, those employees that transferred over to the Water Authority share in the city's pension. They're joint members of our general pension board, participate in that plan, and so they really haven't missed a beat. And then health insurance we both share as well, which as a larger entity with more experience between the two entities, we have over 1,000 employees, and that really helps keep the insurance costs down as opposed to us as a city staying independent with our insurance and not joining forces with the Toho Water Authority. And then lastly is the issue of annexation. Unlike the city of St. Cloud, the city of Kissimmee, we've never had a connection requirement or an agreement that was required of development to annex later on down the road when they can, as a condition of connecting to the water and sewer utilities. And so from that standpoint, we really didn't see much of an impact. But I think, Todd, you had it in your first slide. There was this equalization process. We, as a city, we used to charge the unincorporated customers of our water and sewer entity a 25% surcharge. Having that surcharge was great because it was easy to convince people to annex when, by coming into the city, they'd save 25% on impact fees, 25% on their rates. That has since been equalized, and so we really have seen a drop-off in the ability for the city to convince folks to annex. But on the flip side, that's given us the ability to focus more on things like downtown development, economic development at the airport, and our medical district. So, at some point from a policy standpoint, you have to decide, what makes the most sense for you as an organization. So that's sort of my overview of what our experience has been. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Do we have any questions? And the overall morale from your city staff when you made this transition, how was that?
I think initially there was a lot of concern, but over time, I think the Toho Water Authority salaries, they've been tough for us to keep up with as a city, so I think they benefited ultimately. And we saw more folks transferring over time from the city of Kissimmee to the Toho Water Authority as job opportunities became available. Folks like Public Works employees and Parks and Recreation employees that maybe saw some openings in field positions in Public Works or in Toho Water Authority, for instance.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
very
Thank you,
enlightening.
Mike.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Do you have any questions?
No. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Todd?
And I want to start also with why is utility integration good for Toho? Because first and foremost, as the executive director, I have the responsibility to my ratepayers for Toho and for the organization that I lead. I did want to go ahead and recognize that I have Hector Lizaswain, who is our board chair, here as well. So Toho expects benefits out of this as well if we were to integrate our utilities. Improved regional water supply planning, economies of scale, infrastructure resiliency, and capital deployment, which manifests as cost reduction. I'm not going to get into each of these in great detail because as we walk through some of the values to St. Cloud, it's the same topics. So I first want to talk a little bit about maintaining the value of owning a municipal utility. First and foremost, one of the things that you have today is that you have a seat at the table and you're making those decisions. That doesn't change with joining Toho. Our special act is already structured in a way that as we add a member government, that we have the ability to expand our board. And so similar and on equal footing to the city of Kissimmee and Osceola, we would expect to add 2 appointed board seats plus that ex officio representation that would be one of your council members. We do continue with a payment in lieu of taxes. So one of the primary things that exists with your utility is that you do have a transfer to the general fund out of your utility. Yours is currently structured at 9.5%. We at Toho's, ours is capped at 12%. As part of an integration, we would anticipate being able to provide a guarantee that you would be at least at your current levels and that you would increase with those over a 20-year period at an inflationary ratchet. But to the extent that the utility was profitable and generating adequate revenues, that you would move up to that same 12%. And that is the same way your current ordinance is structured, and the way our interlocal agreements are structured is that the utility has to be making money in order to make that transfer. But it's something that we would anticipate. And then finally, and Mike just mentioned the annexation. So as part of the joint planning agreement with the county, you already have provisions where the county acknowledges the ultimate annexation boundary for the city of St. Cloud. So as part of that, when someone gets water and sewer within that annexation boundary, you require signature of an encumbrance that then allows you to make that decision of whether to annex them or not. We do not see any issue with being able to continue to collect that encumbrance at the time that developments are moving forward through a development process with Toho as well. The other thing Mike mentioned, and that's equally important to me, and I know is very, very important to Mr. Sturgeon, is retaining that commitment to employees. So just like when Toho was formed, there was that commitment for the City of Kissimmee employees. If the City of St. Cloud and utilities and Toho were to integrate, we anticipate transferring all utility-funded employees. They would be assigned to a parallel job classification within Toho. Similar to Kissimmee, we would anticipate entering into an agreement with St. Cloud to provide them not only retention of their existing retirement benefits, but the ability to remain in that retirement system for the remainder of their career and grow that retirement just as if they had remained with the City of St. Cloud. They would maintain seniority for service time and time in grade. So if we have a wastewater operator that has been with St. Cloud for 20 years, it would be just as if they had been with Toho for 20 years. And then finally, the efforts would be made to assign employees in the St. Cloud area. Just as with our employees, we have to make sure that we're able to balance out workloads and things of that nature. But we do see significant growth on this side of the county as well, both with our Sunbridge properties as well as Harmony, as well as the realization that many of your employees are supporting the utility that you already operate, so that need doesn't change in terms of supporting St. Cloud. One of the key benefits would be to stabilize rate pressures. So later on today, you'll be reviewing your budgets, and as part of that, you've got to project that your next 5-year capital program is at least $145 million. There's always uncertainty in that as well. We're seeing around the construction industry, we're seeing significant cost escalation on plants and other infrastructure. Have a lot of capital that is dependent on growth, and so if there is additional growth or significant growth, that can boost those capital requirements as well. The other thing is, as part of the legislature over the last 2 years, we've seen a significant increase in the requirements on the water and sewer sector, requirements for additional asset management requirements, reinvestment in infrastructure. So all of those things are issues that we're monitoring closely and looking at our own capital programs, but preparing to make sure that we're planning for the future. From an overall standpoint, you have a lot of those pressures that are moving forward, and there's really 3 different pieces that fit together. Your overall capital program needs, your revenues that are generated by a combination of rates and impact fees, and then also any borrowing or bonding that you need to do. Borrowing and bonding is a common need in asset-heavy industries, and ours is no different. So over that next 5-year windows, we do anticipate that you'll need to use the 3 tools that associate with those different areas to either reduce costs in capital programs, increase rates or fees, and leverage strategic borrowing for capital programs so that you can make sure that you meet all of your capital coverage requirements, your minimum cash flow balances, and those types of financial metrics. I know you've heard a lot about alternative water supplies, and probably most about Cypress Lake. And that is a main project that's moving forward with the Stopper Group, which is St. Cloud, Toho, Orange County, Polk County, and Reedy Creek. It is a key part of our alternative water supply portfolio. However, Toho is also moving forward with additional supplies, including our Toho Reservoir, which is off of Neptune Road. Some of you may have known it as Judge Farms. And then also a Shingle Creek permit that we have in place, along with our what we call the 160-acre site, which is out at the western portion near 27. Both of those projects provide us an approximately 6 MGD of additional water supply. The benefit of having that diversified portfolio is that all of these projects are complex. There's always challenges that can exist, both with cost control, permit challenges, things of that nature. By having these additional projects in our portfolio, that does offer value to Toho and would offer additional value to St. Cloud as well. Moreover, it would allow, by fully integrating these utilities, it would allow spread of that initial alternative water supply cost over a larger customer base. As an example, Cypress Lake is a 30 MGD project. We anticipate the first phase is 15 MGD, of which St. Cloud's allocation is 2.5. That represents about 2.5% of 25% of your current water supply portfolio. For Toho, our demand is closer to 45 MGD, and our allocation is 6 MGD. So we're down at around 13% of our water supply portfolio. So that's a significant item that helps us control costs because the alternative water supply projects represent a smaller portion of our water supply portfolio. And then, as I mentioned, the risks that are associated with any given project. By having these additional projects available to us, it reduces dependency on any single AWS project. And throughout this presentation, one of the things that I'll talk about is resiliency and redundancy, because that's something that as a utility is vitally important. Because just like your car, there's going to be issues that are going to arise. And so when that arises, making sure that we have, as in your family, having an extra car to go to, for us, having that extra plant or an extra alternative water supply project to go to is vitally important, even if it just means the timing of those projects. So both utilities benefit from improved infrastructure performance, resulting in enhanced level of service by this integration. And this is an area that I want to highlight. And you see a map off to the right. So there's value to Toho in this as well. So we have projects that are our new Sunbridge plant that is serving that Sunbridge area. We are currently have a 1 MGD facility under construction, and it'll be shortly being expanded to at least 2 MGD. We have a wastewater plant that's being constructed. Construction will start later this year for a 3.5 MGD plant. We have also our Harmony facilities. We have those same challenges that you do. By those facilities being standalone, there's benefits to better integrating with St. Cloud. Similarly, where you have a limited number of plants as a smaller utility, that can represent an exposure both for risk and maintenance, and it forces you to invest higher degrees and more capital into those plants to ensure that they're able to meet the reliability that you as a city council and that your customers expect. So expanding the degree of the interconnects adds reliability and flexibility. It gives us that increased treatment plant redundancy. It also reduces the cost of adding capacity by allowing delayed capital investment. So for instance, St. Cloud has an obligation to manage their new capacity, as does Toho. If we are fully integrated, it can allow expansion at a single plant rather than if we both have needs expanding both of those plants at the same time. As we talk through cost savings opportunities, that's where much of the cost savings can exist, is in reduction of capital cost investment or delayed capital cost investment. Also, fully interconnected systems improve the ability to respond to infrastructure issues. I mentioned that issues will arise, and we see this. Recently, we had a water main break, but being able to isolate that water main and have multiple plants that were able to meet the customer demands on both sides of that break was vitally important to making sure that we were able to avoid much more serious issues. As a larger organization with our financial strength, there's some additional benefit to St. Cloud. It provides the economies of scale to reduce costs. Think in terms of things that we do that are the same between us as utilities. For instance, we both use the same customer information system. Managing that system takes resources that don't put water out. They are underlying for managing data, for sending bills. Running a single system is more cost effective. Managing 2 AMI, the automated metering infrastructure backbones, managing 2 SCADA systems, all of those represent duplications of efforts that there are opportunities for lowering costs by having single systems that support a fully integrated utility. It lowers borrowing costs because as a large entity, and we are AAA bonded, it allows borrowing that can be done at very low interest rates. In fact, just 2 years ago, to invest in our gravity sewer infrastructure, we launched an $80 million project through the WIFIA program that is supported by the federal government through EPA, and we were able to close that loan at just over 2%. And it's an $80 million project, but a $40 million loan with $40 million of Toho's monies put toward that project. There's a citation on this slide as well that over the last 10 years, just through strategic borrowing and reinvestment and the strength of our credit, that we've saved an estimated $19 million in financing costs. Additionally, as a larger organization, it supports dedicated technical specialties. And as I travel and participate in national organizations, you can see this. The larger scale organizations are able to provide provide technical specialties that may not exist in smaller utilities. And so that is one of the items that we're able to provide that can help support with identifying challenges, proactively using data, planning for the future, being able to address unique problems when they arise. Provides a larger pool of resources to proactively invest in infrastructure needs. So there will be, as challenges arise, as investment needs are identified, as infrastructure is aging, being able to identify where that is and balance that across a larger resource base has value as well. And then improves the ability to respond to unplanned issues, both financially and operationally, because there will be challenges. When you operate hundreds or thousands of miles of infrastructure, we operate over 450 pump stations. I don't know what your count is, but my guess is it's probably between 150 and 200 these days. With that many pieces of mechanical equipment, there will be challenges. So being able to have the additional resource base to respond when those issues occur is something that adds value as well. Finally, I'd like to cover the last item is reducing rates. Because of the cost benefits that we anticipate through sharing those capital resources, the value that exists to both St. Cloud and to Toho, we would anticipate being able to support rate reductions for the St. Cloud customers. In some initial models that we've run, we estimate that 75 to 85% of St. Cloud's customers would experience an immediate cost reduction, and that full equalization to Toho rates could occur within 5 to 10 years. Now, the exact numbers that would be translated into exactly how that would occur, how those rate reductions would occur, is something that ties back to identifying those cost reductions and what those cost reductions can look like. The more capital cost reductions that can be identified, whether it is Toho's capital cost reduction or St. Cloud's capital cost reduction, has the opportunity to boost this toward the more higher end of that range. So just as a recap, the high points of utility integration, continuing that general fund transfer, which we identify as pilot, reduced rates and costs, representation of the Toho board, an ongoing commitment to the community and employees, improved infrastructure performance, reliability, and resilience. And the value specifically of Toho is that we are a full-service provider of utilities. That's all we do. That's what we're in business to do. We offer those scale benefits. We've got a long history of partnership that I started the presentation with, and we are integrated with the community. So as we discussed, this is an introduction to Toho and a discussion of an opportunity that exists. I am happy to take questions. The next steps would be to develop a more formal proposal for city consideration. We do think that there's value of looking at this in the near future because of the capital cost investments that are occurring both in Toho and in St. Cloud, and the opportunity as those projects move forward. We don't want to miss out on those cost savings. However, we also recognize the city is going through a lot with the filling of your vacant council seat. We know that's a big deal for both the community and the city, and we recognize the timing, but we would like to be able to come back and have a conversation with you about a more formal proposal, hopefully as soon as that new seat would be filled. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you. It was certainly an impressive and thorough presentation. Do we have any council members that would like to ask questions at this time?